Today, we are going to discuss what South Gulf Cove, Florida looks like just 3 weeks after Hurricane Ian came through and devastated southwest Florida. So to give you an overview of what South Gulf Cove experienced during Hurricane Ian, there was 140-mile-an-hour winds, power lines were snapped completely in half, roof shingles ripped off. Luckily, there was not any major damage to houses, meaning the housing structure completely failed, just a lot of roof damage and high winds, power lines, a lot of people without electricity. Now, if you don't know what South Gulf Cove is, South Gulf Cove is a very upscale but yet relaxed waterfront community about 45-55 minutes from Sarasota, Florida. In South Gulf Cove, we have about 55 miles of canals where the minimum water depth is between 4 and 5 feet deep, and it's perfect for fishing and boating. If you love living on the water, South Gulf Cove is definitely an area to check out. Plus, if you have a sailboat, South Gulf Cove has perfect sailboating access as well. Now, as you can see here in this video, there are a lot of home sites still left here in South Gulf Cove. There's a lot of new construction going on in this area, and like we were talking about, there's a lot of larger houses coming in here, over 2,000 square feet. And for the, a sales price here is about $600,000 and up, excluding the land. So, and land prices here range anywhere between $150,000 to $400,000 if you want to be on the water. It just depends on how many bridges you have to go over. But as you can see here from this video, driving along, there is some roof damage on these houses, a lot of roofing repairs that are needing to be done, a lot of blue tarps you see, but you will also see that there's a lot of debris and there's a lot of fallen limbs and trees and everything stacked up against the roadways. That is where the county is going to come by and pick up all the debris and everything from Hurricane Ian. Here you will see us fly over actually a concrete house that was at the block stage and it completely fell down. That was probably the most major damage I saw in South Gulf Cove, is new construction houses that were at the block stage completely, either fell down or they had some minor damage to some walls. Luckily, I had a couple clients building in South Gulf Cove, but all of their walls stayed up, so they're very fortunate for that. But as you can see from this video right here, on this house that's on the corner, you see a lot of blue tarp houses right here, especially that one house that's completely blue tarped. It just came because there's a lot of strong winds coming right off the canal. You will also notice in South Gulf Cove, there was a lot of boats that were actually in the water, tipped over. As you can see, that was in one example. Luckily, we didn't have a lot of trees, because South Gulf Cove is mainly more of just vacant land and not so much trees. This was probably some of the areas that had the most amount of trees, and as you can see, completely leveled off all of those trees that were like 30 feet high. Now we are going down some of these little canalways that you can see in South Gulf Cove. These are probably the most popular house sizes that you will see in South Gulf Cove. But as you can see, once again, there's just a lot of tarp damage, a lot of roof damage that needs to be repaired, a lot of shingles that were ripped off, and so forth. But other than that, there was not too much damage actually to South Gulf Cove. So residents here were very fortunate enough to not have to deal with, completely houses, that flooded, anything like that. South Gulf Cove was actually pretty good in terms of flooding. There was no major flooding that happened in South Gulf Cove, besides maybe a small tornado that people were reporting just because there was some straight line winds that came ripping through. But other than that, there was nothing else majorly reported in South Gulf Cove, which makes South Gulf Cove actually a really desirable area now, because this was nearly a Cat 5 hurricane that came ripping through by the Charlotte Harbor and passed through South Gulf Cove, and South Gulf Cove still stood and is actually in really good shape. So now that we talked about all the single family houses that were in South Gulf Cove, now let's take a look at the duplex areas. But as you can see, just driving along one of the main boulevards here, there's still a lot of roof damage to these houses, a lot of repairs that need to be done. But now let's start talking about the duplexes here in South Gulf Cove. This is Agate Street. So along this area of South Gulf Cove, you will find the most amount of duplexes. In fact, this is where actually all the multifamily residential real estate is in South Gulf Cove. So it's all in one area. So that's very nice. All the duplexes all in one area. As you can see, there's a lot of new construction happening in this area. A lot of new duplexes being built in this area. A lot of them actually stood up very well and fared well. As you can see, we are flying over this concrete block house. This was one of my clients' houses that are being built right now, completely free of any damage that was done. So we are very fortunate for that. And for the most part, the duplexes were relatively spared. There was not much damage. I didn't even see any block walls falling down for the duplexes. That was mainly the single family houses just because they were a little bit closer to the water. So that is a good thing. This was a little bit further inland of South Gulf Cove, but yet if you look off into the horizon, you will see so many blue tarps. And just to reiterate, that was basically the extent of Hurricane Ian here in South Gulf Cove. And now, since you've seen South Gulf Cove and you want to see what the disaster actually looked like day one after Hurricane Ian in Northport, kind of one of the areas that got hit the hardest besides Fort Myers Beach, definitely go and check out my latest videos on that, because I've done 2 videos now showing all the flooding over the roadways, the flooding in the houses in Northport. And just to reiterate, our prayers go out to all the Northport residents and all the people affected by Hurricane Ian, because I saw it firsthand. I went through Hurricane Ian, and I just saw it firsthand of the residents in Northport, how much they struggled getting back on their feet due to Hurricane Ian.